All right, ladies and gentlemen, I apologize I cannot be here today. Again, please do be on your best behavior. Most of today is going to be a chance for you to work on the review packet. Again, the test isn't Monday, it's Tuesday, so we're going to do some more review activities, and I'll be around to answer any questions you have on Monday. But I wanted to give this to you so that you could start thinking about what you know and what you don't know, what maybe you need to learn more about. I think that we're pretty good with drawing dot structures, with balancing ionic compounds and things like that. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to start by going over the front page of this with you, just because it's a reminder of some things that we maybe haven't talked about for a long time. And then the rest of the period is going to be yours, pardon me, to work on the packet. And then you'll turn that packet in, before you leave. All right, so two main categories of bonds. So if you recall, we drew this tree diagram at one point where we said that bonds are either ionic or they're covalent. And if they're covalent, they're either polar or nonpolar. So we're going to refer to this chart a lot. But so what are the two main categories of bonds then? The two main categories of bonds are ionic and covalent. And they always happen, though, for the same reason. The only reason anything happens in chemistry is so that the atoms become more stable. And how they become more stable? By having a full shell of valence electrons. So atoms form bonds in order to have a full valence shell. We've talked about how ionic bonds are always between metals and nonmetals, and how covalent bonds are always between two nonmetals. And so I'm going to give you a moment here. I'm just going to let the video is going to be silent here for a second and give you a minute to try to do these. Remember, if you look at the periodic table, something like this, remember there's that stair step, and these are the nonmetals, and all of these are the metals. Give you a minute or so longer just to finish number 4. Okay, if more time is needed, feel free to pause the video, but I'm going to go ahead and move on here. So what happens to electrons in a covalent bond? Remember, it's in the word, covalent. Together they share valence electrons. So electrons are shared valence electrons in a covalent bond. An ionic bond, one atom takes electrons from another, making ions. And remember, the way that we can help remember it is, if things steal electrons from each other, you have to keep your eye on them. Ha ha ha. Ionic compounds take electrons from each other. All right, so let's go back to our diagram. What are the two types of covalence then? We've got polar and nonpolar covalent bonds. Now, these are two different ways. Remember, we said covalent is a way to share valence electrons. These are just two different ways to share them. Either we share them equally or we share them non-equally. So polar bonds have unequal sharing of electrons. nonpolar bonds have equal sharing of electrons. Again, a way to remember this is if you're sharing unequally, it's because one is pulling harder than the other. So if they're pulling, there's unequal sharing because one's pulling harder, it's polar. If they're sharing equally and nicely, they don't have to pull on each other, so it's nonpolar. That's a way to remember it. What does it really mean? Well, it really means if I have a little weak atom and I have a really strong atom, right, the electrons are going to end up closer. They're going to pull a little bit closer to this atom. And it makes it so that you have a negative pull, which we give this symbol. It's a little Greek delta plus and delta minus. You don't need to know this. But it's called a polar bond because you end up with a positive pole and a negative pole. Just like on the Earth, you have a north pole and a south pole. All right, well, how can you tell? The only bonds that will form nonpolar bonds are the bonds that are the same element twice. So bonds are only nonpolar when they are between two of the same atom. Right, and that's because only two of the same atom have equal strength, right? So oxygen and oxygen, all oxygens have identical strength, so they're going to be evenly matched. So they're going to have equal sharing, and it'd be nonpolar. Whereas carbon and oxygen would be polar because one of these is bound to be stronger than the other. It turns out that it's oxygen. But all you just need to know is if it's not two of the same atom, it's polar. Otherwise, it's nonpolar. I don't know why I just answered all those for you. But you should see the pattern. Nonpolar are the same element twice. Polar are two different atoms. Cations and anions, I feel like we've been over this a million times, so you probably figured it out by now, but cations are positive because apparently cats make some people happy. That's the way to remember it. That's my happy cat. Anions are negative. The way you remember that is because anion sounds like onion, and I'm going to try and draw an onion, apparently very badly. And onions make people cry. I don't know in what universe that's an onion, but whatever. Okay. When do you balance the charges? You balance the charges when you have charges. You have charges when you have ionic bonds. On ionic bonds, you balance the charges. In covalent bonds, you don't, because the electrons are sharing. Okay, the rest of the packet is sort of practice. Pardon me, I don't want to do this together with you, but I want you to try it because I want you to know what you know and what you don't know. You'll turn it in before you leave. I'll take a look at them at the end of the day today so that on Monday we can make sure to review any parts of this that the class is having trouble with. So for the rest of the class, I want you to work on the rest of this packet, and you will turn it in when class is over. Again, please be on your best behavior. Please keep working. If you're not sure and you get stuck, you have classmates who can help you. And I hope you have a good weekend, and I will see you on Monday.